In the heart of Russia, there's a place where hope goes to die, the Black Dolphin Prison. This isn't just a prison. It's a final stop for the country's most dangerous criminals, all serving life sentences. The guards have a saying, the only way to escape Black Dolphin is in a coffin. Today, we're diving into a story from within these walls, a story of a notorious inmate and the investigator determined to unlock his final secrets. Meet Anton Belov, a name that once sent shivers down the spine of an entire region. A brilliant engineer turned ruthless mastermind, Belov was convicted of orchestrating a series of high-profile crimes that baffled authorities for years. He wasn't a man of brute force, but of cold, calculating intellect. His schemes were masterpieces of precision, leaving behind a trail of chaos, but never a single concrete clue linking back to him. When he was finally caught, it wasn't through evidence, but through a betrayal from within his own circle. Even then, he never confessed, carrying a wry smile all the way to his life sentence at Black Dolphin. Years passed. Belov became a ghost, a legend whispered among criminals. He spent his days in solitary confinement, a model prisoner on the surface. He read voraciously, from classic literature to complex physics textbooks. He never spoke of his past, never showed a flicker of remorse. To the guards, he was just inmate number 734, another lifer counting down the days to his inevitable end in this concrete tomb. But beneath that calm exterior, a mind like his was never truly still. Enter Elena Morozova, a young, ambitious investigator with the Federal Security Service. Elena wasn't like her colleagues. Where they saw closed cases, she saw loose threads. The Belov file landed on her desk during a cold case review. Officially, it was sealed, a success story for the department. But Elena was troubled. The official record felt incomplete. Belov's network was dismantled, but the full extent of his operations, the hidden assets, the secrets he took with him, they were all unaccounted for. She believed Belov had a final play, a dead man's switch that could still cause immense damage. Elena got permission to do what no one had done in over a decade: interview Anton Belov. The journey to Black Dolphin is intimidating. It's located in a remote area near the Kazakhstan border, surrounded by miles of nothing. The prison itself is a fortress of despair. Inmates are moved bent at the waist, blindfolded, a technique to disorient them and maintain absolute control. The psychological pressure is immense and relentless. This was the world Elena was about to step into. The interview room was stark and cold. A thick pane of reinforced glass separated Elena from Belov. When he was brought in, he looked older, his hair gray, but his eyes were as sharp and intelligent as ever. He sat down, a faint, almost mocking smile playing on his lips. "Investigator Morozova," he said, his voice raspy from disuse. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Have you come to hear an old man's confession?" Elena kept her composure. "I've come for the truth, Anton. The parts you never told anyone." Their conversations became a battle of wits, a psychological chess match. Elena would present a piece of old evidence, a faded photograph, a redacted testimony. Belov would deflect with philosophical ramblings, quoting Dostoevsky or posing abstract riddles. He was testing her, probing her intellect, her resolve. He wasn't just guarding his secrets, he was enjoying the game. "You see, investigator," he'd say, "the greatest prison isn't made of steel and concrete. It's the one we build in our own minds." Elena refused to give up. She spent nights poring over his old engineering schematics, his favorite books, trying to find a pattern, a code. She realized Belov didn't communicate in words, but in logic and symbols. He wasn't going to give her a map. He was forcing her to solve the puzzle he had become. One day, she noticed a recurring annotation in a book on naval architecture, a series of numbers he'd circled. They seemed random, but when cross-referenced with a star chart from the same year as his last crime, they formed a set of coordinates. It was a breakthrough. The coordinates pointed to a remote, abandoned submarine pen from the Soviet era. Belov watched her through the glass as she laid out her discovery. For the first time, his smile faltered. He hadn't expected her to connect the dots. The submarine pen was his final secret, a hidden cache containing not money, but something far more dangerous: detailed plans for crippling national infrastructure, his final act of defiance against the state that imprisoned him. By revealing the location, Belov had made his last move. He knew he was sealing his fate, ensuring he would never be anything more than a memory within Black Dolphin. But in his own twisted way, he had found a worthy opponent. He had passed on his legacy, not of crime, but of intellect, to the one person who could understand it. As Elena left the prison for the last time, she looked back at the formidable walls. She hadn't just closed a case. She had looked into the abyss of a brilliant, broken mind and come out the other side. The secrets of Anton Belov were finally safe, and the ghost of Black Dolphin could finally rest. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into the world's most fascinating and chilling stories. See you over the next several nights. The taps continued. They were crude, risky, but persistent. Anton realized it wasn't random noise. It was a code. It was slow to learn, but once he did, the message became clear. The man in the next cell was named Sergei, a former military intelligence officer sentenced to life for crimes the court records vaguely described as acts against state security. Sergei knew things about Black Dolphin that were never meant to leave its walls. In Moscow, Elena Morozova's investigation stalled almost as soon as it began. Her requests for information were denied, and files were returned so heavily redacted they were practically useless. When she mentioned Black Dolphin in a high-level meeting, the room went quiet in a way that made her skin prickle. One of her superiors pulled her aside afterward. "You're chasing the wrong trail," he warned her. "Some places exist outside of our normal jurisdiction." Elena met his gaze, unflinching. Then why is a man with prison restraints dying in the capital? The superior didn't have an answer. He just walked away. That night, Elena did something she hadn't done in years. She reached out to an old source. His name was Viktor Sokolov, a former corrections administrator who had retired abruptly a decade earlier. Officially, it was for health reasons. Unofficially, rumors said he had seen something he wasn't supposed to. They met in a quiet cafe near the river. Viktor looked much older than his years, his hands trembling slightly as he wrapped them around a cup of hot tea. When Elena showed him the note from the victim, his face drained of color. "They're still doing it," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Doing what?" Elena asked, leaning closer. Victor's voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. "Using Black Dolphin as a black site. Not just to hold men, but to erase them." Back in his cell, Anton received his most dangerous message yet. Sergei's taps were frantic now, urgent and full of fear. "They're moving someone tonight." Anton felt a cold chill crawl up his spine. Transfers were incredibly rare, and when they happened, inmates simply disappeared from the internal count. There were no announcements, no explanations. Just an empty cell the next day. What does that mean? Anton tapped back, his heart pounding against his ribs. There was a long, terrifying pause. Then came the reply. "It means someone knows too much." Hours later, the prison alarms remained silent, but Anton heard it anyway. The sound of a door opening down the corridor, the shuffle of heavy boots on concrete, a voice muffled by distance. Then, a scream, cut off almost as soon as it began. By morning, the tapping from Sergei's cell had stopped. Complete silence. In Moscow, Elena's phone buzzed with an anonymous message. No sender, no return number. Just a single, grainy image. A photograph of a prison corridor. And on the wall, barely visible beneath layers of chipped paint, a familiar symbol. A black dolphin. But when her team enhanced the image, something else became clear. Etched beside it, almost hidden in the shadows, was a date. Tomorrow. And Elena realized, with a sinking certainty, that whatever Black Dolphin Prison was hiding was about to surface. And when it did, someone was going to die. Thanks for watching. If you're captivated by this story, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. See you in the next video. Moscow felt different at dawn. The city held its breath, and for investigator Elena Morozova, an anonymous photograph was the reason why. It showed a bleak corridor, a faded symbol, and a date that was now just hours away. She kept replaying the words of a dying informant. Erase them. Back at headquarters, Elena moved like a ghost, digging through forgotten archival systems. She wasn't looking for names, but for gaps. Cases that ended too cleanly. Life sentences that just stopped. The pattern slowly emerged. Inmates at a remote prison called Black Dolphin would vanish from the system within months of arriving. Not dead, not released. Just gone. Every record ended with the same note. Administrative review completed. It wasn't a conclusion. It was a door slamming shut. Elena requested a trip to the prison, pretending to audit old cold cases. The approval came suspiciously fast. Someone either wanted her moving or they wanted her gone. Meanwhile, inside Black Dolphin, inmate Anton Belov stared at his cell wall. Breakfast arrived, but his thoughts were on the empty cell next door. His friend Sergei was missing, and his absence was louder than any alarm. Guards were passing his cell more often now, their attention lingering. He could feel it. That afternoon, he was taken for interrogation. The officer who entered wore no insignia. He calmly stated, "You've been communicating." He placed a file on the table. Anton recognized the name, Sergei Volkov. The officer continued, "Black Dolphin exists to prevent contamination. Ideas spread faster than disease." Anton finally broke his silence. "Then why are you afraid of them?" The officer's eyes flickered to the camera above. "We aren't afraid," he said. "We're careful." Anton was sent back to his cell without punishment. In a place like this, mercy was more terrifying than a beating. As night fell, he noticed something new. A faint, rhythmic vibration under his feet. Machinery, running when it should be silent. He pressed his ear to the cold concrete. Deep below, something heavy was moving. Preparing. Elena arrived in Orenburg under a sky the color of dirty snow. Black Dolphin revealed itself slowly on the flat horizon, its guard towers like watchful eyes. At the gate, she was met with polite, rehearsed efficiency. The warden, Colonel Mikhail Orlov, greeted her with a neutral expression. "Your visit will be limited," he said as they walked through a maze of sealed security doors. The prison was unnervingly quiet. It felt less like a facility and more like a sealed container. "Any incidents recently?" Elena asked casually. Orlov's smile was thin. "Routine is our success." They stopped in a control room overlooking the cell blocks. Dozens of monitors showed men standing, sitting, sleeping, always watched. Elena scanned the faces, searching for something she couldn't name. "Do inmates ever get transferred out?" she asked. "Transfers are rare," Orlov replied. "Life means life." Then, her eyes locked on one screen. An inmate stood motionless, facing the wall. Anton Belov. She felt a strange pull, a sense that this man mattered more than the others. She didn't know why. That night, in her guest quarters, Elena was jolted awake at exactly 2:17 a.m. It was the vibration. The same deep, rhythmic hum Anton felt below. Heavy machinery. She slipped out of her room and followed the sound through the dimly lit corridors, staying close to the walls. No one stopped her. The silence was more alarming than any siren. The vibration led her to a restricted elevator marked with a simple code, Level K. A level that didn't exist on any official blueprint. Before she could act, voices approached. She ducked into the shadows as two guards passed. "Transport confirmed," one said. Subject moved from isolation. Elena's heart pounded. At that very moment, deep below, Anton was being blindfolded. They guided him down unfamiliar corridors, the air growing cooler, smelling of oil and earth. When the blindfold came off, he was in a vast underground chamber. It was lined with reinforced doors marked with letters, not numbers. Heavy cranes and containment units stood against the walls. And there, standing among the guards, was Sergei. Alive. The truth of Black Dolphin was far worse than Elena could have ever imagined. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified of our next video.
He was restrained on a gurney, his face pale but his eyes burning with recognition when he saw Anton. "Listen to me," Sergei whispered as the guards adjusted equipment. "They don't kill us, they move us. Underground facilities, no oversight. No records." Anton struggled against his restraints. "Why show me this?" Sergei smiled weakly. "Because someone on the outside is asking questions. And they need leverage." Above them, cameras watched. In the control room, Colonel Orlov observed the scene without emotion. Beside him stood a man Elena had not been introduced to, older, impeccably dressed, his presence radiating authority. "The investigator," the man asked. "She's here," Orlov replied. "As predicted, good," the man said. "Let her see enough to understand the cost of curiosity." Back in the administrative wing, Elena returned to her room before anyone noticed her absence. But sleep never came. At dawn, she was summoned to Orlov's office. "You'll be leaving today," Orlov said pleasantly. "Your audit is complete." Elena met his gaze. "I haven't seen everything," Orlov leaned forward slightly. No one ever does. As she was escorted out, Elena felt it again, the sense of being guided, not removed. At the gate, as her phone was returned, it vibrated once. A new message, coordinates, no text, no explanation. Miles away, Anton was returned to his cell alone. Sergei was gone again, but this time, Anton knew he was still alive. Somewhere deeper, somewhere worse. That night, a new sound came through the wall. Not tapping, scratching, slow, deliberate, a message being carved where no one was supposed to look. In Moscow, Elena studied the coordinates on her laptop. They pointed to an abandoned mining site, officially decommissioned years earlier. Satellite images showed nothing unusual, but Elena knew better now. She closed the laptop and exhaled slowly. Black Dolphin was only the surface, and she was standing at the edge of something vast, hidden, and violently protected. The race against time had just begun.
Elena Morozova stood at the edge of the abandoned mining site just before dawn, the wind cutting across the barren land like a warning. The coordinates had led her here, an unremarkable stretch of earth scarred by old excavation pits and rusted machinery left to rot. On paper, the mine had been shut down after a structural collapse years ago. In reality, the ground beneath her feet hummed faintly, a low vibration that didn't belong to something dead. She crouched near a cracked concrete slab half buried in gravel and brushed away dirt with her gloved hand. A seam appeared, too straight, too deliberate. A hidden door disguised as ruin. Elena felt it then, the unmistakable sense that she had stepped past a line no one was meant to cross. She retreated to her car and made a single call on the burner phone. "I'm going in," she said quietly. "If I don't check back by nightfall, release everything." The line went dead. Beneath Black Dolphin Prison, Anton Belov counted his breaths. The scratching had stopped sometime before dawn, leaving behind a crude message carved into the concrete seam between cells. He had traced it with his fingers until they ached. Level K is only the beginning. Guards came for him an hour later. This time, they didn't bother with the blindfold. Anton was escorted back to the subterranean chamber, where the air felt heavier, the lights dimmer. He recognized the machinery now, the same cranes, the same containment units. But there was something new. A lift platform stood open, descending into darkness. Sergei Volkov sat on a bench nearby, restrained but conscious. His face was bruised, his movements slower, but his eyes sharpened when he saw Anton. "They're accelerating," Sergei said hoarsely. Someone breached the perimeter. Anton understood immediately. Elena. Above them, unseen operators worked in silence. No shouting, no panic, just efficiency. The lift shuddered as it descended, carrying Anton, Sergei, and 3 guards deep into the earth. Miles away, Elena slipped through the hidden entrance as the slab slid shut behind her. The tunnel beyond was reinforced with steel supports, modern and meticulously maintained. Motion sensors triggered low lights as she moved forward, illuminating a path that had no reason to exist. She reached a junction where the tunnel opened into a vast underground facility. Rows of cells extended into the distance, stacked 2 levels high. Not the crude confinement of Black Dolphin, but something colder, more refined. Glass-fronted enclosures, observation decks, control rooms sealed behind thick panels. People moved inside the cells. Not criminals in the traditional sense. No visible aggression, no chaos. They sat, stood, paced. Men of varying ages, some gray-haired, some barely out of youth. All wearing identical gray uniforms. Elena's stomach dropped. This wasn't a prison for monsters. This was a prison for inconvenient minds. She crept along the edge of the facility, recording everything she could. Labels flashed briefly on a nearby console. Subject category, strategic risk. Status, active containment. Footsteps echoed nearby. Elena ducked into an alcove as 2 men in civilian suits passed, speaking in low voices. "Transfer from Black Dolphin arrived," one said. "They'll be integrated below. Any resistance?" "Always. But it fades." The men disappeared down a corridor marked with a symbol Elena recognized immediately. A black dolphin enclosed within a circle, bisected by a horizontal line. Below ground, Anton felt the lift slow to a stop. The doors opened onto a level unlike any he had seen before. Bright, clinical lighting. Glass walls. Silence that felt engineered. A man waited for them there. Older, impeccably dressed. Calm to the point of unsettling. He regarded Anton and Sergei with mild curiosity, like a scientist observing specimens. "Welcome," the man said. "You've reached what comes after Black Dolphin." Sergei laughed weakly. "So this is where you hide the truth." The man smiled. "Truth is a liability. Stability is our goal." Anton met his gaze. "You erase people. We preserve order," the man corrected. "Men like you destabilize narratives. You inspire questions. We remove the noise." Sergei leaned forward. "Someone found you." The man's expression didn't change, but the air in the room seemed to tighten. "Yes," he said softly, "which is why tonight is important." Elena followed a service corridor deeper into the facility until she reached a control hub overlooking a massive chamber below. In the center stood a cylindrical structure descending further into darkness, a vertical containment shaft. A voice spoke behind her. "You shouldn't be here." Elena turned to see Colonel Orlov standing in the doorway, flanked by armed guards. "You let me come," Elena said. "You wanted this." Orlov sighed, almost regretful. "I wanted to see how far you'd go." "Why?" she demanded. "Why build this?" Orlov looked past her, down into the shaft. "Because the world doesn't run on justice. It runs on silence." Below them, Anton and Sergei were escorted toward the shaft. Anton's mind raced. This was the end of the line, the place where men disappeared so completely even prisons forgot them. As they reached the edge, alarms erupted. Red lights flashed. Doors slammed shut across the level. "Breach in Sector 3, a voice announced. "Unauthorized access detected." The man in the suit
Elena
stiffened.
ran.
She darted through corridors as lockdown shutters slammed down behind her, cutting off routes, forcing her deeper into the facility. She burst into a room lined with servers, heat radiating from the machines. A voice echoed from the speakers. "Calm. Familiar. You've seen enough, investigator." Elena slammed a data drive into the nearest terminal. Files poured onto it. Schematics, rosters, transfer logs. "Proof. You can still walk away," the voice said. "Leave this place alive." Elena didn't answer. She pulled the drive free and turned. Anton and Sergei emerged from a side corridor, breathless, guards shouting behind them. For a split second, all three froze, staring at one another in disbelief. Then Elena spoke. "This way." They ran. Gunfire echoed, not aimed to kill, but to herd. The facility was designed to control movement, not withstand rebellion. Doors sealed, then opened elsewhere, funneling them toward a single exit. The shaft. They skidded to a stop at the edge as the alarms intensified. The man in the suit appeared across the chamber, flanked by guards. "You don't understand what you're destroying," he said. Elena held up the drive. "The truth doesn't belong to you." Sergei smiled grimly. "It never did." With a final look at Anton, Sergei stepped backward and fell into the shaft. The alarms cut out instantly. Systems failed. Lights died. The facility shuttered as emergency protocols triggered, containment seals slamming shut, sections isolating themselves. The man in the suit shouted orders that went unheard. Elena grabbed Anton's arm and ran as the ground trembled beneath them. They reached the service tunnel just as blast doors slammed down behind them, sealing the underground world away. They emerged into the cold morning air as the hidden entrance sealed itself, leaving nothing but cracked earth behind. Hours later, Elena released everything. The files spread faster than anyone could contain. Journalists, watchdog groups, foreign governments, all received the same data. Names, locations, proof of a system designed to erase people in the name of stability. Black Dolphin Prison was suddenly back in headlines. So were places no one had ever heard of. Official denials came swiftly. Investigations were promised. Committees formed. Anton Belov vanished into protective custody, his existence now too dangerous to erase quietly. Elena watched the news from a small apartment, the city buzzing with rumors and outrage. She knew the truth wouldn't dismantle everything. Systems like this didn't collapse overnight, but silence had been broken. 3 months later, construction workers at a decommissioned military site uncovered a sealed shaft matching the schematics Elena had released. Inside, they found cells. Empty, except for one. Scratched into the wall was a familiar message. Level K was never the deepest. Elena turned off the television and stared out at the city lights, understanding fully now. The world's most isolated prisons were never about walls or distance. They were about how far power would go to stay unseen. And somewhere, In another place designed to disappear, someone was already counting on the world to forget again. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Subscribe, because some truths only surface when someone refuses to look away.